July 12th, 1973, just after midnight, a fire broke out at the National Personnel Record Center in St. Louis, Missouri. The site was also known as the Military Personnel Record Center and held around 22 million personnel files of military members who served between 1912 and 1963. Most of the records that were destroyed in this fire were Army and Air Force personnel records. 80% of the Army personnel records from individuals who were discharged between November 1st, 1912 and January 1st, 1960 were destroyed, and around 75% of the Air Force personnel files with the last names ranging from Huber to Z, who were discharged between September 25th, 1947 and January 1st, 1964, were destroyed. One of the big challenges initially with this fire was determining what was actually lost, as there were no indexes of these records since they were just filed alphabetically. Another challenge was that many of the records had been removed from the center, such as medical records, which were sent to the Department of Veterans Affairs. However, there was no index for these missing records. The NPRC building was commissioned by the Department of Defense in 1951 to house the Demobilized Personnel Record Center records, which were then housed in an existing building in St. Louis. The design firm that built the building had visited several record centers throughout the United States. During these trips, the design firm came across the debate that was existing at the time whether fire or water damage was the larger concern. This building did not have sprinkler systems on any of its planned, and in 1956, when the building was complete, there was no sprinkler system. There were plans to put in a sprinkler system, as in 1956, the National Archives decided that all future records buildings would have sprinklers and smoke detectors. In 1973, the General Service Administration was looking to award a contract for this building to be retrofitted with sprinklers. Another challenge for this building was that there was no firewalls on many of the floors, or in some cases there was only one firewall. For example, the third floor and to the sixth floor, there was one wall that separated the storage space from the office space. In 1973, when the fire started, the first fire truck was on scene for about 4.5 minutes after the first call, and 42 different fire companies responded to this call. Initially, the firefighters were able to go inside until about 3:15 a.m., where the firefighters were removed and they fought the fire by spraying water on the building. By 2:45 a.m. on July 14th, the firefighters were able to re-enter the building and put out the remaining fires. The cause of this fire was never determined, mainly due to the destruction that the fire caused. The first step after the fire was to remove all the debris and records, and this was done by large boom cranes lifting the shelving down to the ground level. Some of the shelving units still had boxes on them when they were removed. Another way that the records were moved was by having a human chain of workers on the lower floors, taking wet boxes and passing the boxes down the escalator by resting them on the rubber handrails. Staff members also worked in nearby buildings to help provide reference services to the non-damaged records as soon as possible. Another group of staff members worked with preservation specialists who had come from the National Archives and Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. to assist in the recovery. The first step was to place the wet records in plastic milk crates, which can be seen in this image here with all the milk crates lining the parking lot. And then they initially took them to the Civilian Personnel Record Center, located 12 miles away, where the records were sprayed with thymol solution, which was to inhibit future mold growth, and then laid out to dry on racks. At the nearby McDonnell Douglas Aircraft Corporation plant, there were large vacuum cleaners which had been used for the Apollo space program. Up until this point, vacuum chambers had not been widely used to dry records, but initial tests proved successful, and 3 vacuum cleaners at McDonnell and 1 at the NAS and NASA's facility in Sandusky were used to dry the records. After the vacuum dry removed the water, many of the records still had fire and water damage on them. The NARA Preservation Branch in St. Louis is still repairing records in 2012. They received between 200 and 300 requests a day for these records in 2012. The facility that the records are kept in was completed in 2011, and the bays that these records are stored in are kept just above 50 degrees Fahrenheit to minimize future deterioration. No other records are kept in these bays to prevent cross-contamination. These burn records are commonly referred to as B files. NARA is working to release the files if possible after stabilizing them and then digitizing. The first step is to remove all staples and fasteners and perform any necessary surface cleaning. The surface cleaning is done as many of the records still contain inactive mold spores, which could be unsafe if not removed. The records are then separated using a micro spatula in the order that they are folders and placed into polyester film streams. The files are then photographed in two styles, which are infrared and conventional color photograph. Infrared is used to help increase readability in the charred areas. It works very well in moderately charred documents, but not on heavily charred areas on documents. Researchers will then receive a multi-page PDF that has the document in both styles of photography, and NARA will retain a higher resolution master, which is approximately 100 megabytes per image, or 690 dpi. After this process, the records are then returned to storage, and the PDF is used for research going forward. No more than a minute is spent on each page, and between 70,000 and 100,000 pages are digitized each year. NARA is testing out using wet chemical treatments to separate fused document pages to then have them be photographed. One challenge that has come up so far is that when these pages are separated, they are typically wavy, which does not photograph as well as flat pages. Another project that they are working on for patron use is to create a web portal that would allow for deep zoom capabilities on the master files, since the master files do contain more details. Ever since the fire, staff members have also been searching for other records that might contain some of the missing information. For example, they will search pay records created by the Army Finance Corps to find start or end dates for military members. These alternate records are called auxiliary records, and they can be used to create a certificate of military service, which is considered equal to a DD-214 record and allows veterans and their families to claim their benefits. At this point, these auxiliary records total over 1,000 cubic feet of space or paper, and also have some microfilm records as well. My two questions. Have you ever had to find out information from an alternate source, for example, using a baptismal record instead of a birth certificate? What was the process like, and how did you come to that source of information? My second question is, what lessons do you think were learned from this disaster, and how do you see them implemented in today's world? I also have my citations, and thank you for everyone for listening.